may not have known, but you're coming to a laboratory tonight. This is a laboratory for our students to work, get real-world skills on real productions.
Will you still be there when I round the curve? Will you hold my hand when I lose my nerve?
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Yeah. I'm doing pretty all right myself. We're about to listen to Rosanne Cash and hear her talk in Elvis's living room. So I could, you know, there may be cooler places I could be tonight, but I'm not sure I can think of many. It's so great to have you here. This is a really exciting night. It's part of the Rhodes Institute at Rhodes. It's tied to this wonderful concert we have at the Levitt Shell tomorrow night. Partners with CBU, the Visible Music College. It's really a wonderful collaboration among institutions around town to make this possible. I'll be back in a minute to tell you a little bit about what this series is and where exactly you are and what we're going to be doing. But first, I want to bring up our president, whose vision really is the thing that set this all in motion and really the reason you're here tonight, Dr. Bill Trout.
Well, thank you, John Bass. Isn't John Bass terrific? Well, what a special evening for us. And I want to ask a favor. I want to ask you to join me in welcoming two very special friends who've made really this evening possible. Mike and Linda Kerb and their family foundation are committed in so many ways to making the world better, especially when you think about music education, music preservation. A little over 8 years ago, they purchased this home, and hasn't Linda Kerb done a fabulous job of bringing it back to 1957? 8 years ago, they also established the Mike Kerb Institute for Music at Rhodes, which provides so many terrific opportunities for our students. I can't imagine Rhodes today without it. But join me in thanking them. And Mike, I'd like if you just say a quick word about the house, but Mike and Linda Kerb.
What a great job that John Bass has done. I want to thank him for the nice words and also Dr. Wigington. It's just been such a pleasure working with him as well. And Bill Trout and Carol Trout, I don't know what to say. I had the opportunity to work with them for many years in Nashville with the what became the Kerb College, but it was really their vision, and they had already started the college, and I was lucky enough to get involved with it back in the mid-'90s, and watch it grow. It's now the largest standalone music business college in the world. So, and of course that was started by Dr. Trout when he was at Belmont. And we were devastated when he left Nashville, devastated when Carol left Nashville, but then he came to Rhodes, and look at all the great things that are happening. This home, we were afraid, we didn't know what was going to happen when it was sold, and there were different people bidding on it. All we wanted to do, my wife and I, was to restore it, period. We just wanted to restore this home to be exactly the way it was when Elvis lived here. When he lived here in 56 and 57, he had the most productive years of his life in terms of hits. Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, Teddy Bear, Love Me Tender, including the movie. You know, I mean, it just on and on and on. One hit after another, 20 significant chart records just while he lived here in 56 and 57. And so I think there's something special about this home. And it just, people who come here feel like they're living in place where rock and roll, we all know rock and roll started with the fabulous African-American musicians in Memphis, and primarily in Memphis, but throughout the country. But we know that Elvis popularized it to the entire world, and what a fabulous thing, and to realize that happened right here in Memphis. Jim Ed Norman, who's the head of our foundation and our record company, is here tonight, and he's former 27-year president of Warner Brothers. Thank you for all that you're doing on this. And I want to thank Rosanne Cash. What a fabulous person. What impressed me today when I was listening to her is how at peace she is with what she's done. But when you think about all that she's accomplished, and she's done it on her own. I mean, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this. She had more #1 records than her father. But I mean that sincerely. She did this on her own, starting out as a songwriter, and it was like America discovered that this great talent was here, and look at what she's achieved and what she continues to achieve. And so we're just so thankful that she could be here. What a wonderful history she has, having been born in Memphis. Imagine all that she has seen. I mean, just imagine what a wonderful evening we have in store for us. So with that, I will turn this back to you, John. Right, and thank you again for all you're doing, and thank everyone here for being here tonight, and the students and all the and faculty members and members of the community. This is a great city, a great state. We're proud to be part of it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all of you done for the city and for the college and for the student experiences. Just to walk you through, you may not have known, but you were coming to a laboratory tonight. It's not a chemistry laboratory, it's not a biology laboratory, but this is a laboratory for our students to work, get real-world skills, and on real productions. You'll see around we have students filming these, students organize these. That's very, very important for us. With that, I think I'll bring up Molly Whitehorn and Mike Streisguth. Molly is one of our star Curb students here. She has been spearheading this project. She has a really cool project of her own where she's interviewing modern Memphis musicians, usually in this space, to put a historical context on that. And Michael Streisguth, who has flown down to be with us. He is a professor at Lemoyne College, a scholar on country music. He's written books on the outlaw country movement. He's written books on Rosanne Cash, on Johnny Cash, and we can really have no better two people, I think, to lead us through the rest of the night. So with that, I'll bring up Molly and Michael.
Hi, everyone. My name is Molly Whitehorn. I just wanted to introduce the other students that are working here tonight before we bring out Rosanne. But we have Sophia Sella over here, who is my co-producer. And then we also have Phoebe Driscoll over here, who's running this camera. And I think Dr. Streisguth is going to give us a little introduction for Rosanne.
Thanks, Molly. And it's been great to be down here and working with you and working with all of the very fine students here at Rhodes and at CBU as well. So it's all about the students, right? And so this has been just a fantastic day, just a great educational experience in this laboratory. And so I want to thank John Bass for bringing me down. I want to thank John Smerelli, the president of Christian Brothers University, for helping to sponsor this and sponsoring my trip, and former Lemoyne provost. So he and I are former colleagues. We're very fortunate tonight to have Rosanne Cash with us, as you might imagine. She really has not spent the 35 years of her career coming to Memphis a whole lot, chasing dreams. Of course, she's born in Memphis, but she left at a very early age. But she hasn't been here over the years chasing ghosts or chasing tracking the footsteps of her father. But we have her tonight. Because she has chosen in her art to explore new worlds, to think about certain memories and places and characters set in the South that heretofore have gone unexplored in her art. In fact, the album that has been out and still on the Billboard charts for 6 months, The River and the Thread, is the third in what we might call a trilogy of albums, starting with Black Cadillac in 2006 and The List in 2009, that have represented this exploration of tradition and her place in that tradition. As Mike Curb and Jim Ed Norman would tell you, Rosanne had big hits in the 1980s, and in the 1990s, as I said at one of the sessions earlier today, Rosanne's lyricism really became poetry. There's a transition, and one of the best examples of that poetry is the album "The River and the Thread." The album and its lyricism is as complex as the thread is long. It proposes ingenious metaphors, tragic kings and queens, and mystical journeys into dream worlds and shared experience. And that all sounds very heavy. Don't get me wrong. This is very enjoyable music on this album. I mean, it fills the soul, it races the heart. But the thing you got to know about Rosanne is that you never really can just listen to her music. You have to, in some way, engage the challenge that she sets forth in her music and her poetry. So indeed, Molly, we are fortunate to have Rosanne with us tonight. So,
and without further ado, everyone join me in welcoming Rosanne Cash.
Thank you. That was quite an intro, Mike. I feel all aflutter.
Again, thank you so much for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
And to start things off, since Dr. Streiskuth just talked about The River and the Thread, I was wondering if you could kind of talk about Memphis and why it was on your mind when you were writing this album.
Yeah, I was born in Memphis, as Mike said, and I left at the age of 3, so I thought that being born in Memphis was just an anecdote in my life. It was just a place in the past and a touchstone, but not a very profound touchstone. And, of course, I was connected to the music. I don't know any American roots musician who doesn't owe a debt to Memphis, and I certainly do, and for my whole career. And I've lived in New York for 25 years. I grew up in Southern California. So I've lived in the South, but not nearly as long as I have in the West and the North. In 2009, Arkansas State University called me and said that they wanted to purchase my dad's boyhood home in Dyce, Arkansas, which is just about an hour from here. And I get a lot of requests for Johnny Cash projects come across my desk, and none of them interest me. I figure it's other people's ideas of my dad or their book or their tribute show or whatever. But this was instantly compelling to me. I thought, this is something my dad would love. He was so proud of where he was born and raised in Arkansas. And he carried that with him his whole life, you know. This is where I'm from, that strong sense of geography. And also I thought my children should know about this, that their great-grandparents were dirt-poor cotton farmers in Arkansas, and that my grandmother gave birth to 5 children in that house with the help of an aspirin. And that they should know that this is what they're connected to. So I said, yes, I will help. So I started coming down to Memphis and to Arkansas. A lot of trips over those few years. And to help them with fundraising. The house was almost fallen to the ground when I first got here. it was a New Deal era colony, and out of 500 original cottages, there were only 40 left, and my dad's home was one of them. So they managed to buy it. We raised some money with a big show in Jonesboro that first year, and Marshall Grant, who lived on Nokomis Avenue and was the bass player in the original Tennessee 2, came to that first fundraising concert, was going to play with us that night in his 80s. And he played that big bass guitar that day at rehearsal, and he had a brain aneurysm that night. So the last conscious day of his life, he played the bass guitar, and I couldn't get that image out of my head. And I was with John, my husband, and we wrote the first song for the album called Edda's Tune. And with that song, things started opening up. It was real, my heart was cracked open with love and loss and reconnection, and seeing my dad's boyhood home where he slept as a boy. It was a perfect storm of emotional intensity and beauty, and it led to this album.
So what was your songwriting process like when you were writing the album? Did you just sit down at one time and just spill it all on a page, or?
Not really. Oh, that it were like that. No, it was a process. It was a lot of trips. We went to Mississippi and drove out Money Road, and John said to me, we got to write a song about Money Road. Robert Johnson's buried there. Emmett Till was murdered there. The Tallahatchie Bridge is right around the corner. What happened here? This is some kind of vortex. So that was one song. And this song, Modern Blue, was a song that John and I wrote really about our story, because we traveled together, performed together, and around the world. And Memphis started to be like a placeholder in the back of my mind and a symbol for all of those pieces of home that you carry with you, even if you don't live there. And it started to grow. I started to realize that Memphis, the geographical place of Memphis, and this bigger idea of Memphis was really a part of me all along.
It is amazing that anywhere you go in the world, people do want to talk about Memphis, right? And what it means to music, and it's great to hear about its role in the album. And so this actually might be a good seg into the first song that you're going to give us this evening.
This is called Modern Blue.
Went to Barcelona on the midnight train. Walked the streets of Paris in the pouring rain. I flew across an island in the northern sea, and I ended up in Memphis, Tennessee. I keep my head down, I keep my eyes on you. It's a big wide world with a million shades of modern blue. Everybody around here moves too fast. Oh, it feels so good, but it's never gonna last. Everything I had is twice what I knew, but I don't have nothing if I don't have you. I keep my head down, I keep my eyes on you. It's a big wide world with a million shades of modern blue. Will you still be there when I round the curve? Will you hold It's a big wide world with a million shades of modern blue.
Thank you.
So let's talk about that song for a moment. I mean, all roads lead to Memphis.
Yeah.
Certainly is the case. Your roads have passed through Memphis. There is tradition here. You are and have been exploring tradition and where your family is in some of these epical moments, I suppose, in the 20th century. Could you talk a little bit about what kind of sparked modern blue?
Yeah, well, I was about to go to Barcelona, and I had been taking a lot of trips down south and into Memphis, so it was very much on my mind. And thinking of the tug of Memphis, you know, and like I said, not just the geography of it, but the bigger part of what it meant. And being born into that musical stew that was 1955 in Memphis, which had never happened before and won't ever happen again. You think about what was going on in Memphis in the mid-50s, and it's kind of mind-boggling in how it changed the course of rock and roll and modern country music. And feeling, for the first time, deeply connected to that, you know, and also feeling a little bit of license to claim it, which I never had before. And I'm going to be a little bit territorial about this. You know, I was there. I may not remember it, but I was there. and I'm very proud that I was born here at that time, and that I still have family here. My cousins and Etta Grant, Marshall's wife, still lives here. I'm still close in touch with her. My friend Palace Pigeon. I still have friends here, and it feels like the warmth I feel when I come here is really deep. So this song, yeah, I mean, that's us. We go Barcelona, Paris, went up to the Isle of Skye, came back to Memphis.
While we're still talking about the river and the thread, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Sunken Lands and kind of your exploration of Arkansas and the Delta and how that song came about.
The Sunken Lands of Arkansas it's called that because in the New Madrid earthquake of 1811, the land in that part of the Delta actually sank by 15 feet, and the Mississippi flooded it. And you would have thought that would have made the land very easy to till and rich. It didn't. It was called gumbo soil. It was so sticky and tough and full of rocks and roots and really hard land to till. Well, that land the government bought it in 1935 and created a colony for desperately poor families. And you had to apply, you had to prove that you were physically fit and could farm the land. The Cash family applied, and they were given one of the cottages, and 40 acres, and a mule, and cottonseed. And it was medievally hard work that they had to get this ground ready for tilling. And my grandfather and my oldest uncle did all that work. So I started thinking about what my grandmother's life was like in the Sunken Lands in 1935 and how they started with no electricity, and she raised 7 children and picked cotton, you know, so she did the men's work and the women's work. And how she took in laundry to make extra money to get my dad singing lessons, which is a great side story that the second time he went to the singing teacher brought him home and said to my grandmother, "This boy's got something special and I don't want to mess it up, so don't bring him back."
Yeah.
He was 3 years old when they moved to Dias, and he remembered it. He said that his first memory was of 5 empty cans of paint in the front room of their brand new home.
That's mentioned in a song, isn't it? Not?
Shall we see?
I think we should.
Five cans of paint in the empty fields, and the dust reveals the children cry, the work never ends. There's not a single friend. Who'll hold her hand in the sunken lands? The mud and tears melt the cotton balls. It's a heavy toll. Oh, his words are cruel and they sting like fire, like the devil's choir. Oh, who'll hold her hand in the sunken lands? The river rises and she sails away. She could never stay. Oh, now her work is done in the sunken lands. There's 5 empty cans.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. I wonder, Rosanne, I mean, clearly we can listen to that and hear the struggle of the rural existence, the farming existence, and personal struggle as well. And, of course, we know that this comes out of your family's experience. And I know you've thought about this a lot over the years. It might be interesting to hear you talk about it. Straddling this world between universal truth and familial autobiography.
Yeah.
Where does one end, where does one begin for you in your creative process?
Well, I always thought if it's the personal, if it's really good, it becomes universal. I have a good example about that. There's a song I wrote on, John and I wrote on Black Cadillac called "The House on the Lake," and it was about my dad and June's house on the lake. It was shortly after both of them died that I wrote this, and it had a lot of documentary details about that house, the rose garden, and the wood, and the blue bedroom, and the nails. And when I finished writing, I knew it was a good song, but I thought nobody is going to relate to this. It's too specific. It's just too specific. And I was nervous about performing it live for the first time for that reason. I just thought, well, they're going to go to sleep during this song. It's navel gazing. It's just about me. And after the show, this man came up to me and he said, everybody's got their house on the lake. And I realized that the specificity of something does not prevent it from being universal. It's the authenticity that makes it universal.
While you're talking about Black Cadillac, can you talk a little bit more about the ideas that went into that album?
Well, that album is a landscape of mourning and loss. And there were an avalanche of deaths in my family in 2003 to 2005, and it was disconcerting to say the least. And I'm a songwriter. What am I going to do with all of that except write songs? And in fact, I remember feeling really sorry for my sisters that they weren't songwriters. I thought, I don't know how I would go through this without taking it to creative work, for me, songwriting. That doesn't mean it's a depressing record to me. I think, there's a long history, tradition of putting despair and madness and death and darkness into art so that we can see it out there and feel it out there and don't have to let it crush us inside. And that's how I felt about this, that it was a work of beauty, even though it was all about loss and mourning.
You've talked to Rosanne in the past about how your father took his problems to the stage.
Yeah, he did.
And so is there a little bit of that in what you're say about Black Cadillac? Or is this a way, is music a way of thinking for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't have thought about it in terms of performance for me, but I guess that's true even with performance. There's a transmuting power of music. Pablo Casals said, music will save the world. And I believe that, and the greatest conflicts, I think music is the common language. It's the language of the heart, we understand that language, the language behind words. So yeah, I think it's deeply healing, and that you can solve problems. I mean, many times I don't know what I think about something until I write about it.
So you've often written about the list your father gave you when you were just starting out as a performer of 100 essential country songs. Could you talk a little bit about that list and how that shaped you as a performer and how it eventually became a cover album in 2009?
I was on the road with him right after high school, and we were riding on the bus, and I had just learned to play guitar, and I had been writing poetry for a long time, and I decided I wanted to be a songwriter. And we were talking about songs on the bus, and he said, "Do you know X song?" And I said, "I don't know that." And he said, "Do you know this song?" And I said, "I don't know that one either." And he became alarmed. It's not that he was, he didn't also love rock and roll and everything else. It's that he thought I was missing part of my education by not knowing these traditional country songs. So he spent the rest of the afternoon making a list on a legal pad. No Google, just, he had a musicologist's mind, and he knew thousands and thousands of songs. So I kept that list, and after he died, I found it. No, I found it before he died, because I just saw the other day, it was a clip of this interview I did with him 2 months before he died for this show called The Appalachians, and it was an outtake, and they didn't use that bit of it. And I said, "Dad, do you remember that list you made for me when I was 18 of 100 songs?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "What did I put on it?" So anyway, after he died, I started thinking about the list. And it was John, my husband, who said, if you're going to make a covers album, that's the one to make from the list.
So why do you think country music feels so different than other music? And if you were writing a list today, would you put any modern country songs on it?
Next question. No, I don't mean, no, I'm not being rude. I don't have a country station in New York City, so I really don't know what is on the radio in modern country music right now. There are people I like. I did a show with Dierks Bentley, and I thought he was a total badass. I loved him. My own list, I've given a lot of thought to, and different, certain radio stations have asked me to make a list of 10 or a list of 20, and I've done that, and it's helping me refine what my ultimate list is going to be.
We were talking a little bit earlier today also about the courage to be creative, and certainly you've made choices in your career that show courage, and in fact, we were just talking about a courageous moment when Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Two kind of set off into this crazy world of music on a wing and a prayer, and of course we know what happened. We just a block away is Nokomis Avenue, where Marshall Grant was living, and Marshall Grant, of course, was Johnny's bass player, and this was where Marshall Grant was living in 1955, in this neighborhood. A prosperous neighborhood. Marshall Grant had a good job.
As a mechanic.
As a mechanic,
yeah.
Yes, at automobile sales on Union Avenue. And he rolled the dice. He put his heart and his investment into Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Two. And it's really a great object lesson, I think, and that's something I see again, time and time again in your career. The courage to push on, and sometimes there are prices to pay, but as you said earlier, isn't the payoff really great?
Well, the payoff is that you're happy with your life. If you take a risk that on paper seems disastrous, but in your heart is right, and you take the risk, and maybe things aren't perfect, maybe they become more difficult for a while, but you feel your authentic self grow bigger, and it's worth it.
Well, and here, this I think gets back to Molly's question about country music.
Yeah.
Here you are. Many people still identify you as a country music artist when really you've moved away from what we think about as mainstream country, but you still have a major label contract. You're walking that line, doing what you want to do, and it seems that the audience is following you.
I'm so lucky. I really am. I'm on Blue Note Records, which is I've always wanted to be on my whole life. One of the esteemed old labels, and they're incredibly supportive. They actually put marketing dollars into marketing the record, in this day and age when the music business is falling apart at the seams, I feel like I have a ton of support. This record was just nominated for 3 awards for the Americana Association. I can't tell you how lucky I feel to still be doing work I love and have it recognized. I know people my age who are so burnt out at this point. And, I know I've gone through periods of being burnt out too, but you get revived, You show up for work.
You were talking about Marshall Grant a little bit earlier, and you were very close with him and his wife, Etta, and you wrote about that in Etta's Tune on your new album. And I was wondering if you could talk about their relationship and kind of why you decided to write that song. Well,
as I said, he came to that rehearsal and played bass, and he died a couple days later. And that was the first song we wrote after, from all of these trips down south. He and Etta were married for 65 years, which I think is a record for a touring musician. And she said that every morning of their lives that they woke up and said to each other, "What's the temperature, darling?" And I said, wow, that's so beautiful, such a non-inflammatory way to start the day with your husband. And John said that's the first line of a song. So maybe I should play Etta's tune. What's the temperature, darling? 100 or more. The horse is pawing at the dust, violets wilting by the door. But you pour your strongest coffee and I'll take the battered wheel. We'll drive straight down the river road, spread a blanket on the hill. What's the temperature, darling? Now don't stare into the past. There was nothing we could change or fix. It was never gonna last. Now don't stare into those photos. Don't analyze my eyes. We're
just a mile or two from Memphis and the rhythm of our lives. A mile or two from Memphis, I must go away. I tore up all the highways, there's nothing left to say. A mile or two from Memphis, and I finally made it home. There were days you paced the kitchen, there were nights that felt like jail. When the phone rang in the dead of night, you would always throw my bail. No, you never touched the whiskey, and you never took the pills. I traveled for 8,000,000 miles while you were standing still. What's the temperature, darling, as the daylight fades away? I'll make one last rehearsal with one foot in the grave. We kept the house on old Nokomis, we kept the polished bass guitar, we kept the tickets and the reels of tape to remember who we are. A mile or two from Memphis, I must go away. I tore up all the highways, there's nothing left to say. A mile or two from Memphis, and I finally made it home. What's the temperature, darling?
I just got to tell you, to sing that song so close to Nokomis and sing that line, wow, it's quite overcoming.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your short story, John Lennon in the American South.
Wow. How did you find that story?
Someone sent it to me.
That is only published in the UK in a book that is long out of print. I'm quite impressed.
Well, I was wondering if you could talk about that story and kind of what inspired you to write that 20 years ago, because obviously when you were writing it, Memphis was on your mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge Beatles fan, and I know a lot about their history and where they were certain times in their career, and I know a lot about when they first came to the U.S. and they did Ed Sullivan, and then they went down to Florida. They went down and played in Washington, D.C., and then they went to Florida. Well, every day is documented of that trip, the Beatles trip, except for 3 missing days when they went to Florida. So I made something up. I wrote a story about him going to Memphis in those 3 missing days, and who he encountered, and that he went to Beale Street, and who he saw playing on Beale Street, and that he ran into my dad at Sun Records, and that they met in Memphis, and this was in the early 60s, whenever it was he came to, 63, 64, 64. So that he met my dad, and even though my dad wouldn't have been living in Memphis, I made up this whole thing. And that they went to Beale Street together and heard some blues musicians and everything. So my dad was still alive when I wrote that story, and I showed it to him. And he read it, and he sighed, and he said, I could read stories like this all day long. He wanted a novel about it.
You got an autographed picture. You got your autographed picture of the Beatles.
Of the Beatles, he
Yes,
did
yes.
when I was really young. He went to see them at Candlestick Park and brought me back an autograph.
Now that we'd love to
That's
been
a good
fly on
dad.
the wall for that
Yeah.
meeting, right?
I still have it.
Yes. We're hearing you discussing Memphis in your music now. So clearly, though, I mean, you've been contemplating Memphis and kind of in an artistic sense for a couple of decades.
On and off.
now.
On and off. Yes, that's right. It's been in the periphery of my ideas and my consciousness, and I didn't know how to get to it. Musically, personally, and this thing that happened with Arkansas State University, that was the keyhole. And then Marshall's death, boom, things started to make sense emotionally. Reconnecting with my cousin Jackie, who lives here, my friend Palace, with other friends. And Palace took me to Stax. I had never been to Stax before, so that in itself was huge. That was a big revelation. So yeah, the pieces started falling into place.
So, what are you feeling today, and how are you feeling about Memphis as you sit here in Elvis's living room?
Oh, I don't feel nostalgia, I'll tell you that. It's more like a real sense of time travel, like everything is present at once. I don't feel like I'm looking back or trying to touch the past as much as I feel it's still resonating in all of you, in this house, and what Mike Kerb is doing with these and Jim Ed Norman with the music schools. That's to keep the resonance alive and the rhythm moving. And that's why I'm here too. And I feel so deeply moved to be here and to be welcomed so warmly. It's like I was a little afraid, like, well, what's she doing talking about Memphis? She lives in New York City. She didn't have a right to talk about us. But I feel so embraced and at home here. That piece of home, that piece of Memphis I've always carried with me, I feel it alive and well.
It's great to hear you say that. Yes. And to think, I mean, you were a little girl over there at
I know.
Marshall's house, a block away, while all the girls are climbing over the fence here to try to get a glimpse of Elvis.
I know. Well, my dad would drop my mom and me and my little sister Kathy off at the house in Nokomis while he did a show, and it might be 3-4 hours away, and then he would come back in the middle of the night and pick us up and take us home to either Tutwiler or Sandy Cove. And Marshall told me he remembered many times my dad going in the back bedroom in Nokomis and picking me up and throwing me over his shoulder to take me out to the car. And he said, I'll never forget, when he would pick you up and take you out, your little hand would pat the back of his shoulder, even if you were half asleep. And I said, yeah, even then I knew a touring musician's life was really hard.
So I guess for my final question, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about The World Unseen from Black Cadillac. And in that song, you seem to be reaching out to something that's no longer there. And how does that relate kind of to this exploration of the past that you've been doing with The River and the Thread?
Well, The World Unseen, I think is, it's on Black Cadillac, I should say. And I don't have religious beliefs as much as I have spiritual beliefs, that energy doesn't die, it moves somewhere else, and that there's a world behind a veil that we don't see. So I was kind of cracked open with grief when I was writing this song, and my dad had just died and my stepmother, and I couldn't get the chorus. I got the verses okay, and I couldn't get the chorus. And I took my children to Christmas Eve services at the Episcopal Church, and they sang that old hymn, Westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to the perfect light. And I went, that's great. I'm going to put that in my song. So I took Westward leading, still proceeding, and I put it right in my song. I figured, if you steal that openly, it's okay. It's a little bit of a sad song to end on, but if that's what you want. Maybe I'll play this and then something kind of up-tempo to send people into the night with.
I'm the sparrow on the roof. I'm the list of everyone I have to lose. I'm the rainbow in the dirt. I am who I was and how much I can hurt. And I will look for you in stories of the kings, westward leading, still proceeding to the world unseen. I'm the mirror in the hall. From your empty room, I can hear it fall. And now that we must live apart, I have a lock of hair and one half of my heart. And I will look for you between the grooves of songs we sing, westward leading, still proceeding to the world unseen. There are no gifts that will be found, wrapped in winter, laid beneath the ground. You must be somewhere in the stars, 'cause from a distance comes the sound of your guitar. And I will look for you in Memphis and the miles between. I will look for you in morphine and in dreams. I will look for you in the rhythm of my bloodstream, westward leading, still proceeding to the world unseen.
Thank you.
Well, that was amazing. And if you want to close us out with
Okay.
one more,
I
we'd
feel
love to hear
bad
it.
for these people right behind you, Mike. They cannot see through you.
I'm going to move. This is for this side of the house, then.
This is for this, very well done. This is for this side of the house. All right, well, what should I play to lead you out? Maybe 7 Year Ache. I wrote this song when I was 23 years old and had no idea what I was doing. And then you spend the rest of your life trying to get those songs that you wrote when you had no idea what you were doing, right?
act like you were just born tonight, face down in a memory, but feeling alright. So who does your past belong to today? Baby, you don't say nothing when you're feeling this way. The girls in the bar saying, who is this guy? They don't think nothing when they're telling you lies. You look so careless when they're shooting that bull. Don't you know heartaches are heroes when their pockets are full? You tell me you're trying to kill the 7-year ache. See what else your old heart can take. The boys say, when is he gonna give us a room? The girls say, God, I hope he comes back soon. Everybody's talking, but you don't hear a thing. You're still uptown on your downhill swing. The boulevard's empty, why don't you come around? Baby, winter's so great, I'm about sleeping downtown. There's plenty of days to be someone you're not. You say you're looking for something you might have forgot. And don't bother calling to say you're leaving alone, 'cause there's a fool on every corner when you're trying to get home. Just tell her you're trying to kill the 7-year ache, and see what else your old heart can take. The boys say, when is he gonna give us a room? The girls say, God, I hope he comes back soon. Tell me you're trying to kill the 7-year ache, and see what else your old heart can take. The boys say, when is he gonna give us a room? The girls say, God, I hope he comes back soon.
Thank you.